Would like to call this meeting of the Hindley Homes and Oil Building Committee to order at 6:01 p.m. on November the 15th. First order of business is to approve the minutes from the meeting of November the 8th. Can we get a motion to approve those minutes? Dave Martin moves. Anybody? Jameson seconds. All in favor?
Quick note, Tom Harris was our quorum. He dropped off the call. I'm sure some sort of technical glitch, but we don't have quorum right now to vote.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, I just saw that. Okay. Okay, do we want to wait for Tom to reconnect?
Yeah, let's give him a minute and
yeah, we'll do that again when he reconnects.
We have a first and a second. When he reconnects, we can just take the vote.
Right. See if I can get him to reconnect. Oh, there we go. Welcome back, Tom. We just need then to vote on the approval of the minutes from November the 8th. All in favor of adopting those minutes, approving those minutes, and all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. It does not look like we have any members of the general public here, so no public comment. Really not
Chris,
a lot.
I actually wanted to say something today as a member of the general public.
Okay. Then recognize Corey Vesey as a member of the general public.
Thanks, and I'll be brief.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate, and I think that the general community in Darien appreciates the hard work you guys are doing to bid these projects properly, and in a way that's right for Darien and everyone who sends their kids to school. And we're actually, I can speak for the Lake Drive and Phillips community when I say that we're actually very excited about this starting and seeing some of the improvements that you've worked with us to get in for water and flood mitigation. So thank you, and good luck figuring this out today.
Thanks. Appreciate your input, Corey. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. I'm taking notes for Sarah. Would you remind me of your address, please?
Yeah, it's 13 Lake Drive. I should have said that. Sorry.
It's okay. Thanks so much.
In terms of the chair's report, not a lot to add. We're really just kind of continuing the process from last Wednesday when we got a very, very preliminary look at the bid results. In the interim, the ONG AP team put together the series of summaries that were sent around to you all in advance of this evening's meeting. We did have a series of calls this afternoon that we'll talk about a little bit later on, which goes to scheduling and the process and timeline for approval of additional appropriation if we as a committee, which I assume we will, approve going forward to seek that additional appropriation. Dr. Adley had gotten some feedback from the state of Connecticut, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but I'd like to kind of keep things in order. And so with that, would really turn it back over to Laurel and Dave. And I guess, Jill, it's probably appropriate at this point to go into executive session because we're going to be talking about basically each of the bids for each of the trades. So I would suggest we go into executive session at this point.
Take a motion to go into executive session.
So if we get a motion to adjourn into executive session.
So moved.
Moved, seconded. David Martin seconds. All in favor? Aye. In which case, this meeting is now into executive session. We can turn off the recording.
Chris, you have to.
Sorry, Jill?
I think
Who
you have to technically invite.
made the first motion, please?
That was me, Patrick.
Oh, the first motion was Patrick Hayes. It was seconded by Jameson,
Okay.
and it was unanimously approved by the committee.
Chris, I think you have to,
Okay,
and I
so
think you actually have to
please give me
invite
1 second.
us
Yes,
to be
true.
a part of it.
Yes, when we're live, you're in executive session just by virtue of being there. So we'd like to invite Laurel and Dave Cravenzola and Tom Walsh, as well as Kevin Monrett and Dr. Adley. And Corey, you're an ex officio member, as are the principals.
Then we need Eric and Travis.
And invite Eric and Travis as well. Sorry. So with that, Jill, will you turn the recording off?
I will. Just a minute, please.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so we are now out of executive session. And the first item, I would ask Dave Cravenzola, you put together a very helpful bid comparison. If you could go through your high-level summary of the bid process and bid results, comparing the June 2023 bid process to the November 2023 bid process, and your thoughts on going through high level what the differences are and why you think that is the case.
Sure, I'd say in real big picture, overall, when we took bids in the rebid, we received greater bidder participation. That did yield a reduction in the bid totals. Depending on what decisions are made with things like alternates or not, the percentages vary. I guess specifically, we had a more, we had a more favorable bid turnout, as I had said. We have some values where they either went up or down from the last bid. That really this next couple of weeks that Laurel had talked about earlier in the meeting is really going to be a testament to figuring out what's happening with all those numbers. Why did a number go down either more or less than we expected, went up more or less than we expected? We've got to get into a lot of discussions with the trades about that, and come back to you with what we believe to be the updated budget and what those variances are. We are still over the amount that was, if we talk about what was appropriated for the trade value, because the trade value then sets the stage for all of the other fees and costs and contingencies for the project. So do you want to get into some specific questions, Chris and Jill, that we can answer for you on the process?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think the your sense as to why why you think the initial bids were the June bids were higher than the appropriated amount for the trades, and then why you think that more or less those numbers more or less stuck as a result of the rebid process.
Okay. So a couple things that I think we saw some savings because we did, while albeit not a tremendous increase, but we did see an increase in bidder participation. So we did have a little more competitiveness. What we did likely encounter this time was some escalation because the project pushed one whole year. So we had some offsetting costs there, which would diminish some of the bid savings. As far as we did have some bids that were that came in, and we've since received a few notices of some trades withdrawing their bids. There were a couple ones that were glaringly low, and they had sent us a letter, which I believe we had forwarded on to you, that stated, whatever was a mathematical error or whatever it was, and they withdrew their bid. So that obviously pushed us to look to the second bidder. That was another factor relative to the bid cost. And we know that in some other avenues where we or our joint venture partner AP has been bidding work, we did not see an amount of savings as great as anticipated during a rebid.
Okay.
Somewhat market driven at this point.
In terms of what's so that we all understand for the committee's benefit how the process proceeds from here, we've got the bids, the raw bid data from the rebid. We know that there were 7 out of 19 bids that we did not rebid. Has scope review happened on those 7, or has that got to happen as well, Laurel?
The first seven that we already recommended, though, yes, scopes have happened on those. We just need to get through everybody that was in this rebid effort.
Okay, so the rebid, you take the rebid trades, you go through a scope review process with them, you then come back to us and update the bid numbers as to whether they're still accurate or not, and you guys will make at that point a recommendation as to which bids for which packages you would recommend that we accept. And then based on that, you will adjust the overall budget, which would then lead us to the amount that we expect that we would need to request an increased appropriation for. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, I was going to kind of do the two at the same time. So have who the low bidders are and what the cost impact is, overall cost summary. Those are things that I want to pretty much present at the same time.
But ultimately, where what the committee is going to have to consider is kind of two things. One, the bidders that you recommend we accept and the bid numbers that you recommend we accept. 1, 2, the overall budget increase that results from those bids that we're accepting, which would then be the basis for a requested increased appropriation.
That's correct. And you don't have much choice in which bids to accept. It's the lowest qualified responsible bidder. So
Understood.
It's whoever has the lowest number and has the scope of work covered, and they're qualified to do the work.
And the goal is to have the scope review completed by, I think you said, the 29th of November. Is that
yes, correct? My goal is to have all the meetings done by November 29th, and then I'm going to shift gears and prepare this cost summary, put those numbers into the overall overarching cost summary, as well as the updated owner soft costs, that there's an entire package for each school so that the building committee sees what the entire increase amount would be for.
And then, I mean, and this kind of then bleeds into another one of our agenda items, which is milestones and the appropriation timeline. Because right now, there's two things we need to talk about. One is the appropriation timeline as it's currently contemplated, which is that we can be what date, working backwards from Board of Selectmen on the 18th of December and the Board of Finance on the 19th of December, working backwards from those dates, by which date would you target, Laurel? What date would you want us to be voting on the bids that we're accepting and the increased or the modified revised budget that would form the basis for our appropriation request. Is that the 13th?
December 13th would be the target date, and if you wanted to meet on the 6th just to see where things are shaking out, that is fine. But I would plan on having something formal and ready and packaged and prepared for you to vote on by the 13th.
But presumably you could get something to us ahead of just the 13th itself so that we could review, the committee could review it and digest it and have a meaningful conversation on it.
Yes, I can get it to you before the 13th. I just don't know how much farther in advance, since unless Dave wants to work on the side with David Martin on the owner soft cost, we kind of let that go. I was supposed to work on it, but I am now sucked into doing all these scope review meetings. I can shift focus once I'm done with the scope review meetings to get back to the owner soft cost and make sure that that's all jiving. So that can either wait until I'm done scope reviews, or that can be going on now while I'm doing scope reviews.
I think we would let you and Dave Crevenzola and Dave Martin coordinate the best way to do that. But the other piece that we need to wrap into that is the FF&E.
Yes.
The FF&E piece of that, which I think, Travis, we're planning to discuss on the 29th. Is that correct?
We're trying to get numbers from the vendor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we need to wrap this all up with a bow. I need to give it to you with a bow on the 13th. How many check-ins we have is we can talk about. So we got to package all this up.
For the moment, we'd ask the committee then to reserve 1129, 12.6, and 12.13, with the theory that hopefully we can hit 1129 for FF&E. And if there's anything, Laurel, that you have at that point. If not, we have 12.6 as a possible interim date.
And then 12.18 and 12.19 to provide me moral support so I don't get beat up too badly by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance.
You'll be fine.
And if Dave Cravenzola wants, I can meet with him prior to the 29th to talk about the other soft cost items.
I think a big component. I think Kevin Monret's got a hand in that too, right, Kevin?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to be the conduit for it. I think the way we last left it was, I think there was just some legwork that David, you and Kevin, I think we should have to double back on what we felt those new budgets were for you on those things. So yeah, you let me know what works for you guys. We can do a teleconference or an in-person meeting. You let me know.
So in terms of what we need to decide for this meeting, I think it sounds like we want the committee, a sense of the committee, whether or not we want to continue on this path, right? So we are planning to move forward and then go ahead and get with the idea that we would be pursuing an appropriation. That process has to.
Right, that depending on the specifics of the numbers, but the way things seem to be shaking out based on the numbers we have in front of us now, that we would be proceeding through a process as just described that would result in a request for an increased appropriation, both for increased trade costs and for the related increased soft and other costs that would likely go up with those increased trade costs. Is that something that you think we need to take a formal vote on, or is it more just a discussion point among the committee?
I think we'll formally vote when we agree to the appropriation number. That's probably when we need to do it. It's just if somebody wants to halt it now, they need to.
Yeah. If people have questions about the process and the timing and what's being proposed as the path forward, any concerns,
we need to add
questions?
The state process. We want
I'm
Alan.
sorry, say again.
And then we also need to talk about the state process.
Correct.
Alan, you want to chime in? Sorry, Chris.
Yeah, no. That's sort of alternative. That's the alternative that we're hoping shakes out. That's the preferred alternative. I'll turn it over to Alan in a moment. He got a message from the state that seemed to suggest accelerating that time frame considerably. So Alan, I don't know if you'd heard anything further. I think the basic message from the state was, if you want to have your adjusted submission considered for the 2024 priority list on the legislative calendar, you have to submit it by December the 1st.
So that's correct. Fortunately, we seem to have found at least someone who's answering and being responsive a little bit. A lady by the name of Ella Sun. She's the director of the grants administration. Although when you look up the actual org chart, that job seems to be vacant at the minute. But so I don't know how that's come out. But anyway, she was responsive. I went back and asked her about, is that a hard date? Is there any flexibility in that? Unfortunately, she has responded a couple of times today to me, so that's good. The first response was you would have to resubmit the 1049R. December 15th is the priority list that goes to the governor's office. So I wrote back and said, well, if we were to submit it by December 14th, even though that's not jiving with some of our timelines, would that be acceptable? And she said that if I got back to her tomorrow from our committee with that date to be requested, that's what she would request. I don't just know if that's literally plausible, but they're willing to look at the 14th tomorrow and have a rendering on that date if that's something we thought we could do simultaneously or otherwise. And we can resubmit for the 2024 cycle if that's what we want to do.
So to that very last point, if we don't accelerate the process, our submission, because the back end of what we were just describing would be after Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance approval, knock on wood, on the 18th and 19th, we would then be calendared for the RTM in mid-January, approval by RTM, submit 10 days after RTM approval to the state, which would put us on what amounts to the 2024-2025 legislative calendar for this incremental increase in our appropriation. So
because of the timeline, I'm just making the assumption that there are no other processes because the Board of Finance meets sort of mid-December, and December, whatever it is, the 11th or otherwise, is the RTM meeting. I know it's the state of the town and so on, but I'm guessing that we're not going to be able to run another system or request another type of process outside having all the information that we needed even for those meetings if it was possible.
So it sounds like, go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead, Joe.
Basically, the two options are to try and push through a super escalated process that doesn't really jive with how our town government is structured. We'd be putting a lot of pressure, one, and two, we wouldn't have the most complete and correct set of numbers that we'd like to have, and so that, but we would know that we were in this particular round of state funding. Option two is to understand that we would need to reapply for the additional dollars. We would submit sometime after January with the idea of hitting that second legislative cycle. Given the construction timeline, the actual time at which we're reimbursed, it probably would be fine for us to be on the later cycle because we probably wouldn't be submitting for reimbursement until, long after that second approval was made. So my guess is that, not my guess, I think as a committee, we probably want to run a cleaner and stronger process. But putting that out there, we did talk to Jim Palin and John Zagrodzky today. They are aware we sent them Alan's email, which he received today. They are aware, and Dave, you could speak to the Board of Finance piece of it, but in fact, if you would chime in here, your thoughts on simply receiving reimbursement later.
Well, if I'm hearing everyone correctly, the reimbursement amount we're talking about is the incremental amount. The prior
Yes.
approval amount stays in place, so we just be seeking for the incremental amount. Given that, and given that the incremental amount that we're going to be asking the town for in terms of the increase in the appropriation, I think it behooves us to follow our normal governmental process and go to them with the best numbers that we can put together, understanding that we'll get, for the incremental dollars reimbursement request, will get pushed for a year. The construction period is 3 years. I'm not sure that that really hurts us that much.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have to defend. We're going to have to defend our numbers, right? We're going. Let's just use round numbers. It's, we're going to be going and asking for somewhere between, probably 17 to 18 million dollars of an additional appropriation, and we're going to have to defend those numbers and explain why we're asking for that. And I would sure personally be a lot more comfortable doing that with with the process having been run, the scope review having been completed, the recommendations from ONGAP, rather than going in and saying, well, based on where we are today, it looks like we need another, 17 or 18, but just to be safe, how about you give us 20 and we'll give you back what we don't use. I just, my personal view is that's a more difficult process. I'm probably the person with the least experience in front of the town government, but that's just my gut.
Chris, I don't think that will fly with the Board of Finance. I think we have to get that. We have to get the completed numbers to go before the Board of Finance. We can't go back and ask for. We can't go back and ask for a wrong number.
Well, I think if there's no reason to, we shouldn't, right? So I'll ask again, Alan, we understand from you that what you were told today is that it is okay for us to submit in the second legislative cycle, or the next year's legislative cycle.
Right. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So
yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Thoughts by any others on the committee on that point? Sarah, any thoughts by you from the perspective of the Board of Selectmen?
The Board of Selectmen, I was just thinking to myself, we pushed back a meeting and we're going to have a short one before the state of the town, but I don't know that that'll help you time-wise because we still don't have the Board of Finance meeting to the following week. But I believe that the board would also feel that having the most completed set of numbers would be the right thing to do. This would be the second time we've come and asked for funds, and the differential should be the most accurate representation.
Okay. Jameson, I think it sounded like you agreed with that.
Yeah, I just said that. I'm good with that. I think if you're going to go ask for more money, you need to look organized and like you have everything in order, and rushing through a process that the money is not critical to completing the project in the next year. Like it'd be kind of silly and look like we're not following the right process. So keeping on time with everything and doing it the right way, and we have that option, I think that's the right way to go.
Okay.
Agreed.
Great. That was the end of our agenda. Was there anything else that anybody wanted to add that felt like we needed to bring up while we're all together?
I just wanted to ask about the RTM schedule. I know that there's an RTM meeting in the middle of January. What is the intent with telling us that we can go and start awarding contracts? That first 7, I told them to hold I told them they would get a letter before the end of January. So are we still on that where we would be getting something formal?
Well, if you recall the way it works in Darien, if the RTM approves an appropriation, there's then a 10-day waiting period before that appropriation becomes locked, to use non-legal terms. We think, Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, we think that RTM may be like January 22nd, which may take us 1 or 2 days into February, which means we may need to ask for a couple days grace from those 7.
Either
Just
that
because of
or
the-
we
Go
just
ahead.
award those in advance of the others.
Because that's the alternative, right? We have an approved appropriation for $82 million, right? So we have money to award those.
Okay, so the timing for the first 7 can get awarded by the end of January. Our bids came in November 8th. December, January, February. You have till February 8th before these expire, so just be cognizant. Are we going to be there before February 8th?
Yeah, I think based on the RTM schedule that we're aware of, yes.
Okay, because that's cutting it close.
Yeah, we're in a situation where we're cutting a lot close. No question about it.
Well, we're close, but with the approval process, I don't know that we have a choice.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's an RTM meeting between December the 11th and January the 20th or 21st or 2nd.
So Laurel, when you're in your scope reviews, can you let your vendors know that that's our timeline? That
Yeah, I'll put on my my list for like February 15th. February 15th should be a safe date, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We probably will need to be able to communicate when we talk about the appropriation, the fact that we probably will grant some bids before the appropriation is finalized.
Yeah, let me just make a note.
But we can do that in between RTM approval and when the dollars are released to
Yes,
keep ourselves from making a poor decision.
correct.
Okay.
With that, can I get a motion to adjourn? You guys still want to stay on the phone? No one's moving? Oh, Jill's moving. Sarah's seconding. All in favor? Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there for a long meeting this evening, and really, really appreciate all the very, very constructive and thoughtful input and commentary. This is a complicated process, and so really appreciate everybody focusing and thinking hard about this stuff. So
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jill.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good
Bye,
night.
everybody.
Bye.